So far we have seen single chain, simple sequential chain, math chain, right? Now let's see RAG chain. Let's go to our VS Code and try to implement RAG chain, right? So this is our VS Code. So let me create a new Python file and let's save this as RAG chain demo. And like you know, the first thing is we have to install all the required packages. So here we are using LangChain OpenAI package. So make sure you install this package. And then the next step is try to load all the required modules from this LangChain OpenAI, right? So here we are trying to get all the modules that are required to implement RAG-chain, right? So once we install all the required packages and then once we load the modules, the next step is here we are using OpenAI as our LLM. So we stored our OpenAI API key inside this environment variable. So let's try to load the environment variables from this environment file by using load_.env function. And then here we are trying to read the key and we are trying to store the API key inside OpenAI API key environment variable, right? And now let's use this chat OpenAI and try to initialize our LLM. Okay, and then we already know RAG flow because we have already seen the RAG demo. So what we do with RAG, we try to create our domain specific input document, and then here we are hard coding, but you can use document loaders and then try to load the input document and then chunk the document, and these chunks are in text format and the LLM cannot understand text. So the next step is we are creating the embeddings, right? And then once we have the embeddings, we are trying to store them inside a vector database, right? So which is nothing but RAG flow. Now let's see how we can implement the same here, right? So first thing is let's try to define our input document. So this is our input document. We have HP printer sales are up by 30% in 2011 Q4. Lenovo laptop sales are down by 10% in 2012. A3 printer sales is 5% more in Middle East as compared to A4 total, right? So this is our sample document. Here you can replace this and load this document from any other data source by using our document loaders, right? Which we have seen already. But for our demo, I'm just hard coding the values here, right? So this is our input document. Now the next thing is we have to split this input document. So this entire text will be divided into multiple chunks, right? So let's try to create text splitter and split the input document, right? Here we have imported recursive character text splitter, which is inside LangChain text splitter, right? So let's use this recursive character text splitter and split our input document. So we are using recursive character text splitter and we are saying the chunk size as 100 characters and chunk overlap is 20. So that means this 20 characters will be overlapped with the following chunk, right? So once we have this text splitter, we know inside this we have a method called create documents, which will give us the splits, right? So inside the recursive character text splitter, we have a method called create documents and we are passing our input document. So we will get the splits, right? So now if you want to see what we have inside the splits, let's try to print it, okay? So document has been split into, we are using the function length and passing this splits. How many splits, right? So this document has been split into these many chunks, right? And then let's try to print them. Example chunks. I'm just trying to bold this text and then just trying to print 50 times the hyphen, and then now let's print the values, right? So this is a list. So I'm just trying to loop in and trying to print each chunk value, right? So chunk 1, what is the value? Chunk 2, what is the value? Chunk 3, what is the value, right? So here we have 3 values. So it will create 3 chunks, right? So depending on your input, it will try to create the chunks. And to create the chunks, we are using recursive character text splitter, right? And once we have these chunks are in text format. But OpenAI LLM cannot understand text. So we know we have to convert this text into numbers, which is nothing but embeddings, right? So let's define our embedding model. Here we are using OpenAI embeddings, right, which is from LangChain OpenAI. So let's use that and then define our embeddings. We are using OpenAI embeddings, right? So once we have our embeddings ready, the next thing is let's create a vector store so we can store these embeddings. So let's try to create a vector store using the initialized embeddings model, right? So make sure you install this ChromaDB in case if you haven't installed already, right? So let me add that as well. Pip install ChromaDB. Make sure you install this in case if you haven't installed already. So you can use this ChromaDB. Inside that we have a method called from documents, and for documents attribute we are passing our splits, that is our chunks, and for embedding we are passing our OpenAI embeddings model, right? So we created our Chroma database where we can store our embeddings, right? Now next thing is let's try to create the retriever. So inside this vector store we have a function called as retriever. So that will create a retriever, right? So we created our retriever. So we already know the RAG flow, right? We are converting these chunks into embeddings and we are trying to store those embeddings inside our vector database, which is nothing but a Chroma database, right? This Chroma database will store these embeddings inside your local memory, right? Instead of Chroma database, you can use any other vector database also. We have seen different types of vector databases already, right? Now we have imported chat prompt template, which is from LangChain prompts. So let's use this and try to create a prompt so we can chat with our LLM and see if our LLM is trying to retrieve the results from this input document, right? So let's try to create a template, create a RAG template, and this is our template. Answer the following question based on the provided context. The context is we are storing inside this question is this, and we want the LLM to respond in this way. So this is just a template, right? Now let's create a prompt by using chat prompt template. Inside that we have a method called from template, and let's pass this template, right? So we got our prompt ready. And now the next thing is let's create the chain, because we have our prompt and we also have our LLM ready. Let's try to bind both these by using the chain. So let's create a RAG chain. So this is our RAG chain. What we are doing here for context, we are passing retriever where we stored all our embeddings, question, runnable pass-through, right? So this runnable pass-through is a function inside LangChain. It will pass the output as it is to the next layer, right? So whatever question we are passing, that will be passed to the next layer as it is. In case if you want to learn more about this, you can go to LangChain documentation and learn more about it, right? And then we are trying to bind prompt, LLM and string output parser by using the chain, right? So always remember this pipeline represents a chain, right? Now we have our chain ready. So we try to bind our prompt, LLM and the output parser and the embeddings, everything we try to bind all of them by using this chain, and we created our RAG chain, right? Now once we have the chain ready, inside the chain we have a method called invoke. So let's try to call the invoke method on this chain and then see if our LLM is trying to give us the answers, right? So this is our text, right? So this is about HP printer, Lenovo laptop and A3 printer, right? So let's try to ask one question regarding this HP printer. What is HP printer sales in 2011 quarter 4, right? So what we have given, HP printer sales are up by 30% in 2011 quarter 4. So that is our question. And how do we get the answer? We have to call the invoke method which is inside this chain and pass our question, so we will get the answer, right? Now let's try to print the results. So this is the question. I'm just trying to bold this by using this, and then let's also print answer. Here I'm not trying to bold this answer, only the question I'm trying to bold with this one, right? and the answer is stored inside this answer variable, right? So we are trying to print both question and answer. That is, you have to remember the question that we asked is specific to our input document, right? So here you can replace with any of your domain specific, that is your organization domain specific input document. So this is nothing but a RAG application, right? So let's try to save this code, run and see if our LLM is able to answer to this question. So let's run the code and see. So this is the answer it has given. So now let's verify if it is correct. So you can see HP printer sales are up by 30% in 2011 quarter 4, right? So that is the question we asked and the LLM was able to predict the right answer, right? And it also printed this one. So we are trying to print the chunks also, right? So it divided into 3 chunks. This is the first chunk and this is the second chunk. This is the third chunk, right? So this is nothing but RAG chain, right? Let's try to ask another question which is not inside this document and see what our LLM is going to do, right? So instead of this question, so what we have inside this, we have HP, Lenovo and A3 printer, right? So instead of HP, let's try to give Apple and see how the LLM is going to respond. So I'm going to kill this session and then rerun the code and see. So the question that we asked is, what is Apple printer sales in 2011 quarter 4? The given context doesn't contain any information about Apple printer sales, so it is not possible to determine Apple printer sales in 2011 quarter 4 based on the provided information, right? Because if you see our input document, we did not specify any information related to Apple printer, right? So the LLM was not able to give us the answer, right? So you can experiment, right? You can try to change this input document and try to use the RAG chain and then see if the LLM is trying to retrieve the results, right? So you can replace this input document. Let's say if your document is in a PDF file or a text file or any other document or any other data source. So you can try to load them by using document loaders and you can do the same, right? So this is how you can build RAG chain. So what we have done here, let's quickly review. Let me close this. We try to install all the required packages and then we try to load the modules that are required and then we load the environment variables from this environment file where we stored our API key and then we read the key we stored inside our OpenAI API key environment variable and then we initialized our LLM. So once we have the LLM ready, the next thing is here we are trying to store our input document inside this documents variable. This is nothing but a list. Instead of this hard-coded values, you can replace with any of your domain specific data. You can load them by using document loaders, right? And once we have your input document ready, we are using recursive character text splitter to split our input document. We are using chunk size as 100. So we are telling it to divide by 100 characters and also try to overlap 20 characters from each chunk so that we can preserve the context. So you have to choose these user defined parameters depending on your input document, right? And then we have our text splitter. Inside that we have a method called create document. So we passed our input document. So we got our splits and these splits are in text formats. Here we are just trying to print them. So we have to convert these text chunks into embeddings by using OpenAI embeddings, which is inside LangChain OpenAI. Next thing is, once we have these embeddings ready, we have to store them inside a vector database. Here we are using Chroma database. Inside that we have from documents method, we are passing our splits to documents and embeddings to embedding attribute, right? So we got our vector store. And now let's retrieve them by using as_retriever function. So we are storing them inside a retriever variable. Now let's create a RAG template. So this is our template and this is our prompt. We are using chat prompt template. Inside that we have a function called from template and we are passing our template, right? So once we have our embeddings, LLM and prompt, all of them are ready. Let's try to bind them by using this chain. So here we are trying to create a RAG chain and we are passing the context as retriever where we have our embeddings and question runnable pass through, and this is our prompt, LLM and string output parser. to parse the results, right? Now here we are just trying to print the question and answer. This is the question we asked, and we are trying to call the invoke function which is inside the chain. So we are passing the question, so we are getting the value of the answer, and we are just trying to print them here, right? So this is how you can create a RAG chain. Instead of this input document, you can replace this with any other input document and try to experiment this, right? So this is how you can create a RAG chain. All right, thank you.